This is Dr. Bob Fitrakis bringing you the other side of the news here on WGRN, and I'm with Danny Dougan.
Hey now, here I be on the other side of the news on the Green Renaissance. Happy to be here, and we've got a great guest today, don't we?
Dr. Emma Briant.
Yes, indeed.
Eminent scholar.
Eminent Emma, they
and
call
has
her.
a forthcoming book, Propaganda Machine Inside Cambridge Analytica.
And that's what
and
she'll
the
be.
digital influence industry.
Right, that's what she'll be filling us in on this wonderful program. Yes, indeed.
And you're trying to influence people right now, digitally.
Always. I always want to influence.
Don't let Mr. Dougan lead you astray.
It was Carnegie.
I don't care how much fun it is.
How to make friends and influence people.
Indeed.
Don't you remember?
Well,
He was one of the first influencers ever, Dr. Carnegie, right?
And we'll be back with Dr. Emma Briant.
Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.
Dr. Briant, welcome to the other side of the news.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. It's an honor. Looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, so you've got a forthcoming book, Propaganda Machine Inside Cambridge Analytica and the Digital Influence Industry. How did you get involved? Well, Cambridge Analytica means scandal, and in this obscure industry which may be dominating not only our times but our minds.
Yeah, indeed. I was doing my PhD on the same topic of propaganda, but actually looking at the British and American war machines, if you like, you know, the Anglo-American propaganda apparatus of our governments during my PhD. And that involved interviewing people in intelligence, in working for the military, but also all of the contractors that were pulled in, you know, during the Iraq War and Afghanistan,
Right.
you know, long protracted conflicts that went on forever and, you know, involved billions being spent on intelligence and psychological warfare operations and so on. That was all going into private industry. And so I interviewed not just people in the government, but also contractors. And that included a company called SCL Group. And that was the Cambridge Analytica parent company. So I knew all of
What's SCL stand for?
Strategic Communication Laboratories. And this was really quite a small firm when I first met them, which was over 10 years ago now. Like, I was interviewing them, you know, while I was still a student and meeting these people who I never imagined were going to be getting involved with such really disgusting and dirty political campaigns around the world. But I, you know, began digging further and further into what they were doing, as well as, you know, looking at other companies and looking at the wider industry around all of this and how it developed as, you know, we've gone into the sort of digital media age.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are they're doing? You read articles here and there on Cambridge Analytica, and it says it has all this private Facebook data, and that really all these points, these likes and these comments and these postings, after a certain time period, they accumulate 50, 100, 150. They know more about you than you do. They can predict with accuracy how you're going to behave politically, and politics has always been about propaganda.
Yep, absolutely. So, you know, I mean, they're psychologically profiling you in a way that, you know, the Nazis or the Stasi, you know, the FSB would have just like dreamed to be able to do this kind of profiling. And now we've got into an age where they're all doing it, all these governments around the world, as well as, of course, private industry. And you have like all of the people coming up through the war on terror now setting up their own companies And, you know, they're all like dark arts of manipulation for hire. And, you know, data-driven tools that used to be, you know, reserved only for intelligence operatives back in the day and really weren't very sophisticated then. Now we're carrying that kind of surveillance that used to be getting built into the walls and so on, you know, back in Stasi East and in East Berlin. You know, that's capability, and worse is, you know, in your living room. You're feeding it all of your data all day long. You're telling it exactly what you buy, what you think, what porn you're looking at, all sorts of really disturbing things. Okay?
Yeah.
So they can do with this kind of data. None of us do. You know, the biometric data. What about your insurance data? You're, you know, giving all these private companies your very, very personal information about what, you know, what your vulnerabilities are, your psychological health, your emotional health. They know when you're up, down, you know, what's going on, when you're most vulnerable, and they can use that against you to target you. And these are, you know, companies working for political campaigns who want to suppress the vote, who want to, you know, tear people apart, turn them against each other, divide and rule in order to win a campaign. Now, what we need to be doing is to really sort of think about how to regulate this kind of sector, because people can't imagine the types of ways that their data can be abused. And, you know, it's got out of our control. And honestly, people also don't have the ability to sort of anticipate, so therefore can't judge even when they are giving consent. But most of the time in America, people, you know, give up all their data without any consent at all, and they don't even know where it's being used.
Or they get a couple bucks or a special discount for their surveys.
Yep, exactly. So they incentivize this kind of thing. And of course, it's the poorest people in our society who are going to do that, you know? I mean, Bill Gates isn't going to be getting paid $2 to do an M-Turk survey, you know, or something like this. You know, they incentivize this for people who have no other choice and are really desperate for money. And, you know, they're doing that all the time. And a lot of why Cambridge Analytica were looking to partner with cryptocurrencies and so on was to try and enable things like that, where, you know, people haven't been very digitally literate in some parts of the world. So in Africa or South America, for instance, there hasn't been as much media access and access to data. You know, they were doing things like partnering with cryptocurrencies and so on in order to get people to earn a little money through an app where you're giving it data. And, you know, that hooks people and they give up everything, basically. You know, and I think a lot of this stuff is very manipulative, and you're not giving through, you know, in your fullest capacity when you're being incentivized because you're desperate.
So how is this influencing people in the U.S.? So they find out I'm looking at transsexual royals porn sites.
Still?
Can they use this to build a profile, to manipulate me, to predict what I'm going to do?
I think it kind of depends on who you are and what you know, and what they're going to do. For most people, you know, of course they're interested in whether you're, you know, gay or whether you're like, what your political inclinations are, you know, but also, you know, your gender and so on, all of this stuff. But also they're interested in things like your personality and your emotional state. I think actually one thing we haven't focused enough on is psychological health and emotions. And, you know, a lot of talk about personality types in relation to Cambridge Analytica, because, you know, some of the things they were doing was focusing on targeting neurotics. And one of the things they found most effective was targeting neurotics with hate-driven messaging, fear-driven messaging, scaring them. The people who are most susceptible to fear, you know, were being targeted with messages about, you know, how, you need to be scared of crooked Hillary and so on.
And immigrants too, right?
Right, and who may be dying, Hillary may be dying from some unknown disease, and there may be actual video footage that purports to back that up.
Yeah. Oh, Ilhan Omar is, a terrorist, or, like all this kind of like disinformation that gets put out that is, designed to turn people against each other, turn people away from voting, actually.
Right.
If you're left, it's designed to split the left, to divide us so that we're weaker. And it basically is to try and demoralize people and make people feel like then they don't want to vote. I mean, it's the same old thing people have always done, but you know what? It's far more powerful when you know exactly what that person's triggers are.
Well, yeah, there used to be street rumors, right, where someone would run and you'd spread a rumor about them, but this is the power of, social media. This is more powerful than mass media. They can have you convinced, pizza parlors are rings for pedophiles and events are going on in the basement. And it's everywhere in the world, right? Not just the United States.
Exactly.
And right now in the world, streaming to you from the Indie Media studios of the Free Press Network here on YouTube, but also available online at WGRN.org. Plus, listen to us on Columbus, Ohio's 2 volunteer-run low-power FM radio stations, Fridays at 5:30 p.m. on WGRN 94.1 The Green Renaissance, and Mondays 5:30 p.m. on WCRS 92.7 and 98.3. We're on with Dr. Bob Fitrakis on the other side of the news, and our guest, Dr. Emma Briant, an expert on the Analytica scandal and the way in which we're being influenced through our social media, etc.
And you were saying before you were interrupted by the ID.
That's okay. I was just going to say that, with social media, they know who you trust in your network. So if you are always retweeting or, sharing a particular friend or a particular source, that's the avenue they're going to try and get the information into that they think will be, sending you in the direction they want to nudge you in. So it might not be trying to get you to vote for Trump, but it might be to try and get you to vote for somebody that isn't going to win, or to vote, or to not vote.
Not vote?
So, or to just, make you feel demoralized. And they also use people within a network, so you have an influence on your friends. So, you need to think about this as more than just you, because we are people in society and in a social network. We're not just, individuals. We have to think of ourselves as more than that, because they do. And, we have a responsibility to all of the people around us as well in social media. Because, a lot of people say, well, I'm not going to vote for Trump, so it doesn't matter about me and my data on Facebook. Well, that's not entirely true, because it's, very easy to be swayed in a particular direction, and they're going to nudge you in whatever way will disable you in whichever election that, you're engaged in. So it might not necessarily be to support the right-wing candidate, but it might be to stop you voting in a way that will stop that candidate, if that makes sense.
Okay, so they might want to sway me to vote for Jill Stein or Gary Johnson because they know I'm not going to vote for Trump under any circumstance, but they're going to make sure I don't vote for the only person that could beat him.
Exactly. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, I'm not making a judgment about a particular party. But the point is that what we want is to be able to evaluate all of the facts that are available in a way that isn't, trying to manipulate us. We don't want to be personality profiled and targeted. this is not the way that we want our media environment to work, and it's not a public forum. We need to be able to make an educated decision about whether we vote for Jill Stein, Bernie Sanders, or Hillary Clinton, or whoever it will be in 2020. And in order to be able to do that, we need to know that we're not being, psychologically profiled and surveilled.
But they know who they want us to vote for, or how to get us not to vote, right? That's what they're working on.
Well, that's why we need to be pushing our parliamentarians and congressional members, in order to change the policy when it comes to oversight of all of these activities, because these tools, unfortunately, are going to be used by all sides. And the Democrats too, I would say. We need to be worried about the fact that there is an arms race going on in this area. And these are psychological warfare tools. Like I was saying, I discovered them, what they were doing from a very different area, psychological warfare in the war on terror. These people gained their experience and have applied it then in our elections. And it's really, very disturbing to think that these kinds of tools can be morphing into supposedly campaign tools. I don't think of them in that same way. I think this is a really disturbing industry that has grown up. And you have companies like Cambridge Analytica, which are connected to, private intelligence firms. In some of the places that they worked in the world, they were, using companies like Cygroup, which is an Israeli private intelligence firm. They were working with them as partners in some of the elections that they were working in, as well as Black Cube. These kinds of affiliations are really very disturbing when we think about the hacking that went on. I don't know whether they were, involved in that, but, they certainly reached out to Julian Assange and tried to get hold of that information. And I think Assange said no. But the point is that, leaks and hacks can be weaponized to sway an election, and in ways where you can, put out false information in with the new information, and you don't know what you're getting anymore. Because there's a lack of transparency of that industry, and a lack of regulation, everything that these companies are doing, we can't see. It's all completely opaque, and it's completely unregulated.
Emma, can I just understand a little bit better? Because I know who the players here are that would support a Donald Trump, the big energy companies, for instance. Who in England stood to gain by pulling England out of the European Union? What industries? What moneyed interests?
Well, again, it's things like big oil and
again,
and so
same
on. Yeah.
sort of players. Then okay, I thought so. Just right. Okay.
Russia obviously seems to
of course.
Influencing,
right.
And a lot of its industries are, the fossil fuel industry.
Yes.
They're interested in, destroying basically the Arctic, Antarctica, in order to be able to, have a line of trade route, sail ships basically through the Antarctic, and be able to, drill where there's minerals underneath the ice, and the ice is melting, and that, suits them just fine. There's also, the arms industry, and they have a big stake in that and want America as a market as well.
Sure.
In the UK, in relation to Brexit, also the sugar industry was a big player in Brexit.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Some of the people who were it's a very big player in this game. They have been funding the Conservative Party and have funded the EU campaign. There's a lot of ties to the Leave EU campaign from the sugar industry.
Okay.
Write about that in the new book chapter that
All right.
I'll have very soon.
Okay.
Now, how is this different than fundamentally, which looked like a massive propaganda campaign, old-fashioned perhaps, that got the U.S. to attack Iraq, right? There are weapons of mass destruction, which, the last report that they cited was from 1981, totally inaccurate from the International Atomic Energy Commission. And all that looked like was basic, repeating, non-factual information. So this is more insidious because we don't even know we're being manipulated. What's the big difference? Because that looked like a very successful campaign for Dick Cheney and George W. Bush.
Of course. Yeah, although I think there was more dissent around the world when it came to that.
Yeah, the largest protests in the history of the planet, right?
Yeah.
The old line that he said he was a uniter, not a divider, and he united the 20 million people worldwide. The greatest, you're right. So there was tremendous opposition, which then led to the policy within a year or two beginning the switch. So in this case, we're not aware. We've got a couple minutes left. What would you tell us?
I think the most important thing to remember from that, in terms of how different it is the mass surveillance piece, because we didn't have that in 2003.
Right.
We were not dependent on these devices for our entire lives. It's really very difficult to opt out of these companies digitally harvesting all of our data. When I...
carry your IQ, right? It's a third party. You can't even opt out of it. It can watch you without you knowing it.
And you can't keep track of all these places that you're giving access to your data and where they're taking it. So if it's not being regulated, then there's no control, and it's extremely dangerous. I would say that, we need to get this under control very rapidly.
Amazing.
Where
can people get your information? We got about 30 seconds left.
Yes, okay, so you can check out my website, www.emma-bryant.co.uk, with all of my information on there. And I'm also on Twitter, at Emma L. Bryant, Briant. Thank you so much.
All right,
thank you very much.
Forthcoming book,
We
Propaganda
appreciate it.
Machine Inside Cambridge Analytica and the Digital Influence Industry. Thank you, Dr. Emma Briant.
Thank you so
WGRN.
much. I'm honored. Thanks again. Bye.
Hi, I'm Bob Fitrakis. Free Press Network began fighting against the oligarchs in 1970 with the Columbus Free Press newspaper. The paper started on the Ohio State University campus as a reaction to the Vietnam War and the Kent State killings. Columbus Free Press is one of the oldest independent, investigative, activist papers in the United States. Now a video podcasting, the multimedia studio provides the new media soapbox that the Central Ohio community needs. We need your help to keep muckraking journalism alive in the heartland. Help us fight against fraud, corruption, and injustice. You can keep the Free Press Network growing with a one-time donation or become a monthly patron. We have a variety of benefits set up for almost any level of support. Help us comfort the afflicted while we afflict the comfortable. Well, Dan, you heard it from Dr. Emma Briant,
Yes,
distinguished scholar who was looking at war propaganda and turned up presidential election propaganda.
Yes, and then some. Not just presidential, but what's gone on in England to remove them from the economic situation known as the European Union. And Big Sugar was involved, as well as your typical energy type companies. So yes, she's quite knowledgeable, and that's the kind of stuff we all need to be aware of.
And she's got an article out the listeners can look up, or the viewers, if you're watching this on video, called Oxford University Can't Hide Its Role in the Cambridge Analytica Scandal.
Right, you always hear about the Oxford versus Cambridge. Well, Oxford's not getting away with this one. They're involved too, but anyway.
They're working at it together. We got former Cambridge University professor Alexander Kogan desired to obtain Facebook data, Emma Briant tells us, for his research. And again, Cambridge Analytica which never had access to the 87 million profiles, gets it by hooking up with this former Cambridge University professor in this blatant attempt to manipulate American voters.
Well, the manipulation of voters has always gone on, but now it's rather high tech, and it just seems to me that it's almost impossible to get away from entirely. So
they've got on Facebook all that data, everything you liked. When you probably don't hit the like button that much. But
well, once
upon
upon a time, I think I told you that I'd hit a like for Sarah Palin, and so they still aren't quite sure where I stand politically. Neither am I, which makes it all the more interesting. But no, it's yes, your likes, your dislikes, or whatever topics you're going
towards.
towards.
The Ten Commandments.
Yeah, and that.
Or a picture of a bottle of Jameson.
I was the one ripping it apart, actually. So yeah, the tablets themselves. It wasn't easy, and then I handed it off to Moses. But nonetheless,
and
yes.
Your tone, they've got your tone, right? The analytics.
The analytics. Well, I'm still confused as to how it all breaks down, but I tell you what, where they do seem to get us is that in causing us to no longer care and feel like we can't really change things, right? Isn't that what she was pointing out repeatedly? And
sure.
I think we've all found that.
Everything from your porn to your post.
Whose porn?
Apparently, everyone's
Speak
porn.
for yourself.
I'm afraid my porn is... I'm going to have to up my porn game.
Yeah, there you go.
Into something more interesting,
then
like homonecrosophilia.
Ah, indeed. That's one way to go. But in the meantime, this woman, you said, has a new book coming out.
A brand new book, and let me give you the name before it's time to go. Dr. Emma Briant, Propaganda Machine, Inside Cambridge Analytica and the Digital Influence Industry.
And you've been here on the other side of the news.
Death and hatred to mankind, poisoning their brainwashed minds. Oh, Lord, yeah.